Hi, everyone, and welcome to How Have We Never Seen This Before? This is a podcast where two best friends discuss iconic movies that, well, neither of us have ever seen before. I'm Isabel,
And I'm Lauren.
and this is How Have We Never Seen This Before? Hope you enjoy.
Shout out to Clarissa. Her Instagram is @_CHUN Instagram _ for being the first person to guess that we are discussing Citizen Kane this week. If you would like a shout out in the next episode of How Have We Never Seen This Before, head over to our Instagram and be on the lookout for clues on our Instagram stories each week. All right, let's get into it.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of How Have We Never Seen This Before? This week, we watched Citizen Kane. So, last week I said I knew absolutely nothing about The Godfather, and this week I know less than nothing about Citizen Kane.
Same. Okay, so I pretty much always thought it was going to be a movie where some sort of crime happens and a detective has to solve it. I don't know why I thought that, but I did.
I literally didn't think anything of it, but all I knew was that one time Jenna Marbles went to watch it and she didn't like it and she kept falling asleep.
Wow, that
That's
is.
that's literally the only thing I knew. Also, when I went to find somewhere to watch the movie, one of the links I clicked was like Rosebud is his sled. I didn't know what that meant, but I just figured it was something and then moved on from it.
They gave away the ending in the link to the movie.
Yeah. But I don't know, it didn't really it didn't mean anything. I mean, I guess it kind of ruined it, but I didn't think anything of it. So as the movie begins, it's just you're zooming in on this giant mansion and you're progressively getting closer and closer for the first 2 minutes of the movie. You see monkeys in a cage out front and you're just zooming in closer and closer.
So I thought the palace that it's zooming in on looks a lot like the castle from The Wizard of Oz that
Oh.
the Wicked Witch lives in. I don't with the monkeys too on the outside. I just wasn't sure what was going to happen.
Did The Wizard of Oz come out around the same time? That was the 30s, right?
I have
Or
no idea.
Wizard of Oz was color, but not many movies were in color anyway, even when that came out.
Yeah.
So then it starts to snow, and we move into the snow globe scene where there's a man lying on like one of those therapist couches, and it zooms in onto the snow globe. He has it in his hand, and then he whispers Rosebud, and then it drops to the ground, and you assume he's dead. And immediately, first I was surprised that the snow globe didn't break at all. It just kind of rolled. And then immediately a nurse comes in a second after he dies. And I thought maybe she killed him.
Maybe we're just used to witnessing violence through watching these films, but I thought this scene would be a lot more sinister than it actually was.
I don't know. I just thought someone had killed him. There was no premise to had he died. Like, did he just die of natural causes? Like, why did he die? There wasn't anything about that.
Mm-hmm. I guess that's the point, though, that everyone's looking for a reason to scandalize his death, but in reality, it wasn't anything.
Yeah. So then they have that same newspaper effect like they did in the last movie. And the headline said that Xanadu's landlord is dead, and I was confused because they didn't say the man's name yet, and I was like, is Xanadu a person? Is Xanadu a place? And then it turns out it's a place. There's actually two. One is like the original one is a pleasure palace, and this man built another one just for himself, and it has enough stuff in it for 10 museums, and there's also tons of animals, and they say it's the largest private zoo in the world.
I have a fun fact about that.
Okay.
So basically, this movie is kind of based off of another kind of magazine tycoon named William Randolph Hearst, if you know of him. And he also had a huge zoo outside of his house. And so it's kind of showing that this movie is kind of about him, but not really.
Yeah, no, we'll get to that later because I wrote a lot about that. But I also, in one of the Amazon I rented it on Amazon, and they have little hints about the movie, and that was one of the things that they said, that it was clearly based on Hearst, and
Hmm.
he also refused to have anything about the movie published in his magazines because he was so upset by it.
Hmm.
So then we found out it's set in 1941. It's not that important to the time frame, I don't think, but I just wasn't sure when it was set. And we see the large funeral for him. And we also find out that it's Charles Foster Kane, who equals Xanadu's landlord. And it makes sense that he's a really big deal because they do this newspaper effect again, and it's in every language. There's Chinese, there's French, several English newspapers, and then they explain that he's a newspaper tycoon. He owns 37 newspapers, radio stations, grocery stores, and a list of other things. And I was just thinking, isn't this illegal? You can't have monopolies in everything like that. And I wasn't sure if that started after 1940 or if that was always a thing. Like monopolies are illegal. I don't know. Do you know?
I know nothing, but I do know that a lot of media conglomerates own a lot of things. Like if
Yeah,
you think about Time Warner.
that's why it was a big deal when Disney was trying to buy 20th Century Fox. There was a big problem with that because they thought Disney's becoming a huge monopoly in the business, and you can't have that.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. It's not like his magazines were or his newspapers were the only ones. Like, obviously, they had competition, and that was part of the story.
But that was like at the beginning. He bought out, that's a bit later, but he bought out another newspaper, like all of their head people. So
Hmm.
towards the middle of his life, maybe. I'm not really sure. But after you find out he's dead, I was kind of confused on the timeline because it did jump around a lot. You could tell when Kane was older or younger, but it was a little bit hard with the other characters sometimes.
Hmm.
But then we meet Walter P. Thatcher, who, when I saw him, the way he was talking, I assumed he didn't like Kane at all and thought maybe he's the one who killed him because I still wasn't sure that he had died of natural causes.
Hmm.
And he also called him a communist. Someone else called him a fascist. Yeah, it was a lot of words being thrown. And then
Well, I think that it's funny that what we've discussed so far, like a lot of the situations, a lot of the name calling that happens back then can be applied today,
yeah,
which I think is funny.
yeah, it's been 80 years and nothing's changed. They also talk about how when he owned his newspapers, he took a lot of stands on issues most of the time, which you can probably say more, but it's not really a part of journalism anymore. You try to remain neutral and give all the facts, but also you should be aware of your biases when you're writing.
Hmm.
But you can't just only say one side of the story. Like people do, but
We'll get into that when we talk about yellow journalism.
they also say that he was married twice. He had tried to get into political office as well, but he never could. They also explain that some of his newspapers closed or merged during the Great Depression. And I don't know what my note says there.
Oh, he didn't think there would be a war.
Right. He said he had talked to all of these connections in France and Italy and Germany, and he said that they were too smart to start a war. And then we find out that that whole thing was just a newsreel about Charles Keynes's death.
Uh-huh.
And the journalists in the room who had just finished broadcasting this, they said, well, that was great, but it only tells us what he did, not why he did it. So they decide that they want to try and figure out more about him, and they decide to start on his final words or final word, which is Rosebud. The only thing I didn't understand was, how does everybody know that that was his final word?
Yeah, I think that they probably interviewed either the nurse or the butler, and they probably just said, like, Rosebud was his final word.
That seems like an invasion of privacy, but clearly they don't really care about that.
Okay, listen. These reporters practice awful journalism.
Yeah.
We can't take anything that they're doing as an example of how to act.
So then this group of journalists decide that they're going to go out and talk to anyone that Kane knew in his life. So they start off with Susan Alexander, who is wife number 2, and she won't talk. She's so distraught. She's just been drinking constantly and really can't form any words. Um, and then this journalist, he tries to get information out of the server who's there as well to see if he has heard her say anything about Rosebud or just anything about Kane in general. And he calls his boss and is like, no one's saying anything. So then his next assignment is to go to Walter P. Thatcher's. I guess it's not a grave, or it's kind of a memorial. It, it's just a big building with his name on it, and it
Mhm.
turns out he's dead. When I had thought he would like come back as a villain or something. I don't know.
He would have been so old.
I know, but I didn't realize how old. I don't know. I had assumed he was the same age as him up until that point. So the people there give the journalist Thatcher's manuscript, and it has a pretty large section. It's pages 83 to 142 on all of Thatcher's interactions with Kane since he met him. So then the scene goes back to 1871 when Kane is a little boy. I think he's probably like 5 or 6,
Mhm.
and Thatcher is talking to Kane's mother about buying her property. But then I wasn't. Then it seemed like they were selling Kane himself, and then I was like, "Are they selling both?" Because it seemed like in the contract he was like, "Yes, so in this it says that I'm gonna take your child, and he can have this money when he's 25." It was just very uncomfortable.
I think part of the deal was that, like, obviously Kane grew up poor, his family was poor, so
Mhm.
that was part of the deal, like, for Kane to be taken with Thatcher, as so he wouldn't have to grow up poor. He would have a lot of money. She says to him, "You're going to be the richest man."
But I didn't think he could. He couldn't access it until he was older.
Yeah, but I think still growing up with a banker, like, you
Yeah.
live a more luxurious life.
Well, the way they were speaking, I thought they were selling their child. After they signed the papers with Thatcher buying the property and buying her child, um, Thatcher goes out to meet Kane for the first time, and he's out there playing in the snow, and he just walks up to him and is like, "Yeah, I'm going to be taking you away on a train, and you are just coming with me right now, and that's it. Your mom's not coming. No one's coming. You're leaving with me right now." And obviously, Kane would be upset by that. He's a 6-year-old boy. So he just decides to take his sled and hit Thatcher in the chest with it to push him away. He makes about a foot, and then they turn him around and they go to leave.
Yeah. Imagine some man coming to your house, buying your mom's property, and then all of a sudden he comes outside and your mom's like, well, he just bought you too.
Wait, oh my god. It's like a these are your new owners. Um like a fanfic story. Oh my.
Harry Styles is now your new owner.
Can you imagine? That's exactly that's what this whole story is. It's just a fanfic.
Thatcher is actually Harry Styles. 14-year-old me would be quaking.
In your Aeropostale logoed sweatpants and jacket.
Yep, with my Jonas Brothers posters on the wall.
So as they were leaving, I was just thinking that is this snow asbestos? Because they did that in old films. This asbestos looks like snow, and lots of people got sick from it because they just use asbestos.
Yeah, well, okay, here's the thing is that you can't really be sure what caused these people to be sick because all they do is smoke cigarettes in this movie.
That's also true. I don't know if any of these people died from mesothelioma or lung cancer, but anyway, I was just thinking about that because that used to happen in old movies, so I wasn't sure. Also, once they go into the city, he's being paraded around by Thatcher, and he also got a new sled.
Oh, yeah, this movie also turns out to be a Christmas movie. All three so far have had Christmas in it.
Every movie's a Christmas movie
You're
if you
right.
try hard enough. Also, there's this kind of montage of Thatcher just talking about Kane over and over again. And with each change of the scene, they're only like 5 seconds long, but with each change of scene, Thatcher looks directly in the camera and breaks the fourth wall every time.
I kind of thought that was like a funny part of it.
I thought it was funny too. And he kept doing it over. I don't know if he meant to or if he just kept looking at the camera.
Yeah, I think it was intentional.
Yeah. Okay. So then, well, Kane starts his newspaper business.
Well, I was gonna say, you kind of cut to a scene where Thatcher is basically saying, like, you can have all of these things that you want. And he goes, no, I don't want any of that. I just want this newspaper, this
Yeah.
dying newspaper that no one really reads.
And at that point, he shows his first headline to Thatcher, and Thatcher's like, "This isn't true. There's no evidence that it's about a woman getting killed, and it says that she was murdered." And Thatcher's like, "This isn't. You can't write this. There's no evidence that she was murdered. It's just that she was killed." And I was like, "Oh, so he made his fortune off of yellow journalism,
Mm-hmm.
and everything makes sense."
Yes. And for those who don't know what yellow journalism is, I actually just graduated college where I did study journalism. And so basically, yellow journalism is when a publication gets its readers by sensationalizing and exaggerating stories for a headline, and they don't have much reporting to back them up. And so it's basically just a way of creating shocking headlines and shocking material with no real evidence, and it's not objective and it is biased. And so kind of throughout this whole film you see Kane making these decisions and kind of representing yellow journalism. And then you also see kind of a parallel with Thompson, the reporter, looking for this juicy story that's not really there. And it's kind of ironic because this movie is about how you shouldn't make money that way. And then I think the irony of it is that Kane becomes a victim of yellow journalism in the end.
And there's definitely more things that we can talk about with yellow journalism a little bit later.
Mm-hmm.
But then it shows that the newspaper has been open for probably about a year and a half, and Thatcher gets the first report that he lost $1 million in the first year. And Kane says, "Well, I don't really care about money as long as this newspaper stays open. I can keep it open for 60 years with the money that I have, even
Mm-hmm.
if we lose $1 million every year."
Yeah, and you can kind of see that he lives to bother Thatcher.
Yeah. Probably because he bought him as a child.
Yep.
And then he also says that if he hadn't been really rich, he probably could have been a great man if he had. So I think he kind of blames Thatcher for the way he's become, because if he had stayed with his mother, he could have been a really great man, and he wanted to be everything that Thatcher hates, like against capitalism, just living to live and loving people, which he doesn't really have a capacity to love anyone but himself, as we
Mm-hmm.
find out a little bit later. Then we are back with the journalist, and he's going around asking lots of people what Rosebud means. And I wasn't sure, but whenever he asked people about it, the people he asked seemed to be surprised, like almost like they knew what it was, but they didn't want to tell him. At that point, he was talking to one of his partners,
Bernstein.
yeah, Bernstein. And he just seemed like he was like, "Oh, Rosebud," kind of like he knew what he was talking about but didn't want to tell him.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess no one really did know what Rosebud meant in the end, except for Kane.
Yeah.
And Bernstein says that Kane never really wanted money. He just wanted that newspaper. That's all he wanted, like he said before. And he also said that he should go to see Mr. Leland, Jedediah Leland, because they went to school together and was Kane's best friend and kind of his only friend.
Mm-hmm.
So before he goes to see Mr. Leland, they show him coming into this new office of the New York Enquirer, the paper that he bought, and he walks up to the office of I guess he's the editor, the main editor, and he's like, "I'm taking over your office. I'm going to sleep here until we turn things around because I want this to be a 24-hour news outlet."
He says to Mr. Carter, he says, if the headline is big enough, the news is big enough.
Mm-hmm.
And that is not how it works. You can't just I guess maybe for some media outlets that's what they think will work, but you can't just create your own agenda based on what you want to be important and you want to sensationalize.
Yeah, and that's kind of all that Kane really did, though. He would push ideas that he thought were important.
Hmm.
But then they're in Kane's new bedroom slash office, and they just had. I guess probably this was normal in the 40s, but it was an open flame. It was just gas coming out of a pipe with an open flame.
Yeah, that doesn't seem very safe.
That seems so dangerous. Like, how? I mean, I guess why wouldn't you think to put something over that?
I have no idea. No wonder there were so many fires.
And that same scene, he's also talking to Bernstein and Leland, and he says that with all the headlines and the constant printing of the newspaper, he's giving people the truth, which I thought seemed kind of ironic because he's just kind of making things up that are still up for speculation, which I think is the one thing that made it seem a little bit better was the fact that he put his name on it. Like, I'm saying this, it's not, he kind of took responsibility for it.
He's pretty transparent, at least, about what he owns and his wealth.
Yeah. So at that point, we are shown a picture of some executives from a rival newspaper, the Chronicle, and Kane says that these are the best in the business. This is why the Chronicle has 400,000 in circulation.
Mm-hmm.
And he decides that that's what he wants.
Wait, that's actually interesting because now if you look at circulations of newspapers, like 400,000 is really not that much.
Yeah.
But back then it was huge.
So what he decides to do is he steals all the executives from the Chronicle. I wasn't sure if it happened all at once. It's 6 years from when that original picture was taken. I'm not sure if he kind of poached them over time or if all of a sudden after 6 years he took all of them, but I'm assuming that he took them for money. Like, he offered them money that they couldn't refuse.
Yeah, he probably bought them out.
Yeah. And then there's this big party that, because now all of these executives are over at the New York Enquirer, and it's all old white men sitting around this table.
And now they have a circulation of almost 700,000.
Yeah. It's a huge jump. And at this party, a band comes in, and then these women dancers come in, and all the men, as soon as they walk in, they're just catcalling them. And
before that happened, the music started playing and the waiters started moving so fast, and I thought it was gonna be like the dance scene from the Polar Express.
That's exactly what I was thinking. When with the hot chocolate.
Yeah.
At that point, also Kane is dancing with the girls, and they also mention that there's a war started. And I was like, oh wait, I remember something from my Com 1 class where we learned about someone starting a war with Spain because they wrote it in the newspaper. They said there was this war that was going to start with Spain, and that's exactly what Kane did in the story.
Oh.
It was, yeah, the Spanish-American War was pretty much started just by yellow journalism by a newspaper just saying that there is something starting, and that actually made it start because both sides kind of thought, oh, what if there is something.
Oh yeah, I do remember learning about that in my comm classes.
I figured you might know more, but
no, I totally forgot about that.
It was like this thing that came from the back of my mind, and I was like, wow, I actually know something about this.
You actually learned something in college? What a concept. Another part of the scene that made me like cringe inside was when Kane was dancing with the women,
Mm-hmm.
and one woman in particular, and he tries to grab her and kiss her, and she pushes him away. Like, think about, they look happy because they're being paid to look happy and dance, not because they want to be there. And I think it kind of represents the idea that Kane thinks he can buy approval and friendship and love.
Oh, definitely.
Which kind of becomes a theme throughout the whole movie.
Mm-hmm. And I think also in this same, like, after the dancing, they cut to Leland, and he's concerned that the new executives will leave when they get a better offer because he said they were completely devoted to the Chronicle and their values, and they easily switched to the Enquirer because of money. So I think at some point, money's not going to be able to buy them out because they'll keep asking for more and more and more.
Mm-hmm. You can't buy loyalty.
Mm-hmm. So then Kane leaves for a while, and Leland and Bernstein are running the office. But when he comes back, they've increased their amount of employees. There's over 400 employees at the newspaper, and they
Mhm.
make this trophy for him.
Well, there's a whole room filled with all of the statues that he's bought over
Hmm.
his travels.
Yeah, it's what used to be his bedroom office, and it's just completely filled to the top with trophies and not trophies, statues. But then he finally walks into the office, and they go to give him this trophy, and he seemed really really flustered when he walked in the room.
Yeah, I think it was just the fact that the carriage or whatever that was just waiting outside for him, so he had to skirt real quick. And it was kind of annoying because everyone was so excited to see him. He ran back to grab the trophy and then
Yeah,
left,
that's
which
I was
was
just
annoying.
it was a weird interaction with him and everyone else.
So Bernstein, I guess his little like minion, was saying that so the person that he married, she's the niece of the president, I think.
Yeah, she's related to the president, but not directly related.
Yes. So Bernstein was saying that she's going to be the president's wife one day,
Hmm.
which really annoyed me because basically he was saying that Kane is going to be president one day, and that's like kind of all she'll ever be, just someone who's related to presidents.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that, but yeah, definitely. After this scene, we're back to the present, I guess, and the journalist Thompson is meeting with Leland. Now he's really old, and he suggests that Rosebud could be something that Kane lost. He like has all these things, but the one thing that he's lost is whatever Rosebud is. Leland also says that Kane never really believed in anything, and Leland personally never believed in anything that was said in the Inquirer. So Kane was just saying all these things just to sensationalize, to get people to support the newspaper, while Leland, being on the inside, really knew that none of this was ever going to be true, and there was no reason to believe anything that they printed.
And it's really important, like what he says about Rosebud being something he's lost.
Yeah.
I'll just make a note of that now before we get to the ending.
So then we see the progression of Kane's marriage to his first wife, Emily, the president's distant relative. So they're sitting across from each other at a table, and it keeps moving forward in time after a few seconds, and at each scene they're talking about how he spends more time at the newspaper than with her. And
Mhm.
also with each transition, I noticed her hair gets shorter and shorter, and she gets angrier and angrier, and then they also progressively say less and less to each other.
Mhm. And he also kind of, at least at the very beginning, he made time for her and then he
Mhm.
made excuses for her. And then by the end, he didn't even make excuses for not really being there. And she was just completely fed up with him.
Yeah, and the second to last scene of this, she also like mentions how she also has a problem with everything that he prints in the newspaper, because she recognizes that it's not 100% accurate and really just leaving things up for speculation. And in the last scene, they don't even speak at all. They both have their own newspapers, and they're sitting at opposite sides of the table.
Exactly, yes.
And as Leland's talking to this journalist, he also mentions that all Kane wanted out of life was love, and love from other people, but the problem was that he couldn't love other people. He only could love himself. So
Hmm.
that's why he really didn't pay attention to his first wife. He stopped making excuses. He just kind of ignored her, and it's pretty much the same thing that happened with his second wife.
So basically, it kind of all goes back to that day where his mom chose money over him,
Mhm.
basically said this money is more important than love. That moment kind of shaped how he thinks that love works because he thought that his mom was doing that out of love. And so kind of like you can buy love is pretty much how he thinks the world works.
Yeah. So then we see how he met his second wife, Susan Alexander. He met her while he was just standing on a street corner. She was laughing at him because she had a toothache. He also somehow got covered in mud, and she offered to let him into her house to get him hot water. But also, you're gonna let a stranger covered in mud into your house?
I think there were different times.
Yeah. And at first he was angry she was laughing at him, but then she was in such pain because of her toothache that it's like a moment of real compassion from him, kind of. He says, "Oh, just laugh at me because when you were laughing you forgot about this toothache." And he also asks her how old she is, and she says she's a ripe old age of 22. And I was like, "Oh my god, we're ancient."
I know. I am turning 22 in a few weeks, and that line scared me to death.
Also, this whole scene, they were like flirting back and forth with each other. Neither of them blinked once.
Yeah, it kind of was really awkward, especially when he was doing the hand puppets or the shadow puppets.
Yeah, it was weird. It was so weird.
Weird.
This also marks his run for governor, and it looks like he's still with his first wife. And earlier in the movie, they mentioned that his political career never took off because of an affair, and it's clear that Susan is that affair.
Hmm.
It also turns out that he has a son. This is the only mention of his son. He never comes back in the film. He's also running against Jim Geddes. And as they're leaving this rally that Kane has prepared, and Kane goes up to her and asks her where she's going, and she says, "I'm going to blah 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 this address," and his eyes get wide, and she says, "I'm going to go investigate. Do you want to come along?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, I should probably come along for this."
Come along for the ride.
So they get to the door, and when the maid opens it, I'm guessing she doesn't see the wife, and she immediately says, "Oh, Mr. Kane."
Hey,
And,
what's up?
and "Hey, how y'all doing?" And then like his wife makes a face and is like, "Yep, yeah, I knew it." And they walk in and they go up the stairs, and Susan comes out and is like, "Charlie!" And then she sees the wife, the same thing that happened with the maid. And at the top of the stairs, Jim Geddes comes out of the room, and it's revealed that he threatened Susan to write this letter to Kane's wife about the affair, and kind of is what forced him to come.
Hmm. And Susan kind of is playing dumb this whole time. She's like, "Oh, nothing's happened between us. I don't even know. He just forced me to write this letter."
Yeah. And it's also revealed they like start a conversation, and Getty says that he didn't send this letter just because they're running against each other, but because Kane showed Getty's in his newspaper in a convict outfit, and it it ruined his reputation, not just politically but even with his family. It hurt his children to see that.
Hmm.
And by running the affair in the newspaper, he can also ruin Kane the same way that he was ruined.
Hmm.
And well, then his first wife just says, "Well, they're not going to run it. Of course they're not going to run it." And Kane says, "Well, no one can tell me what to do." So he says, "Just run it, like I don't care." So the story is run, and it ruins his political career. And you see the Inquirer printing the next newspaper, and they have two versions. The first one says Kane wins, but then the second one says fraud at polls. And I was just like, you can't say that. Like, clearly he lost because of an affair. Like, everybody knows about the affair. You can't say there was fraud at the polls.
Yep, that would be fake news. But I think it's weird how he pretty much dares Jim Geddes to like publish this, and he doesn't. He would rather face the repercussions of that than just like. I don't understand. Like, why wouldn't he just stop?
Yeah.
It's almost as if he wants this to happen.
It was very weird. Like, I don't know, maybe it was a way to divorce his wife.
She was gonna leave him anyway, I feel like.
Yeah. I don't know. It seemed like he really wanted to be in politics, so why would you? I don't know. He could have had another chance if they didn't
Hmm.
run this story.
Oh wait, also I think maybe the reason why we don't see Junior again, I think he dies.
He dies?
I think he and the first wife die. Yeah. Both mother and son perish in a car accident shortly after Emily leaves Charles. That's why we never see him again.
Where was that? I don't remember that.
That was at the beginning in that newsreel of his life. Basically, it says that his wife left him and then she died like a week later because of a car accident with the son in the car too.
Are we supposed to speculate that he caused the death?
Well, I wrote it down because I was like, maybe this will come up later, but it never did. I
Mhm.
don't think he had anything to do with it. It's kind of like, I don't know, maybe I'm just used to violence in movies, but you expect like there to be some sort of shocking thing happening. Like,
Yeah, no, that's exactly what I expected too, and maybe that's the subtleties of what makes this movie great.
yeah, maybe we're so used to scandalizing everything
Yeah.
that it's sometimes just that simple.
So the next scene, they're back at the Inquirer, and Leland is talking to Kane and says that he acts like he owns the people and he expects them to kind of do whatever he wants, like they would still elect him governor even though this happened. And I guess that's why they had that story about fraud.
And I think he's using like his ownership over the newspaper to kind of once again buy the affection of people.
Yeah, yeah. And I also was thinking, like, Leland is the only person who's really honest with Kane about what he's doing and why he shouldn't be doing it. And I was surprised that Kane kept him around for so long because he usually shuts down everyone else who talks to him and says, well, you shouldn't be printing this. Like his wife, he completely shut her down. But right in the next few seconds, Leland says he wants to leave. He wants to go to Chicago. He doesn't want to be in the same newspaper that he is that Kane is right now.
Hmm. Well, I think so. Leland grew up without money, right? So he kind of he's really only interested in um being friends with Kane like out of pure loyalty. Like
Yeah.
he was the only one that was truly loyal to him and not looking for any money. And so when Kane like constantly disappoints him, I guess he finally got fed up with him and wanted to be out. This is also when Leland starts to drink, and this whole interaction that he has with Kane, he's drunk for it, which is it comes up later. And so now he marries Susan.
Yes. Once he marries Susan, he it's like right after their wedding, they're walking out of it's either a church or a courthouse, and they get into this car, and he's like, "I love her singing. If she sings opera, I'm gonna buy her an opera house." And he buys her an opera house, and it was mentioned earlier, but he spent like $3 million on this building, and it shows her getting ready to perform at this opera house. And
She also looks so flustered. Like she doesn't look
yeah.
happy to be there. It was also kind of funny because like Susan's like when they first meet, she really likes him because like he makes her laugh, right?
Mhm.
But then they start talking and she's like, "Oh, yeah, I like to sing. Yeah, I'll play you a song." And then he marries her. He's like, "We're going to make you a star. Like, here's this opera house. Like, can I get you the best lessons ever?" Like he goes from 0 to 100 real
Yeah, he really
fast.
does everything. But after this performance, it seems like it's years later, not like a lot of years, maybe like 2 or 3 years later, but Leland and Kane haven't been speaking since he went to Chicago, but now he's back, and it's the same night, or maybe the night after the opera performance, but Kane goes into the office and he goes to talk to Leland, and he finds him passed out at a typewriter because he was drinking. And Bernstein, who is with Kane, goes to read what he was writing, and it's a review about how terrible his wife was at the opera. Kane takes the review, like at first he's mad, but then he takes the review and goes to finish it himself, which Leland finds out when he wakes up. He doesn't change it at all. He just continues writing the bad review, which once Leland comes out to talk to Kane, Kane fires him right away. And we cut back to old Leland, and he says that the reason that Kane published that same review and didn't change it at all was to kind of prove to Leland that he was an honest man, which that's not how this works.
Yeah, you can't just write a bad review of your wife that you don't even think is true and then say, "Oh yeah, we're honest. We don't
Yeah.
lie about anything here."
At this point, we're about to leave Leland, and Leland says that there was a rumor that nurses used to be pretty, and it's not true then, and it's not true now. He's just like bashing these nurses who are taking care of him.
They're just standing there right next to him.
Yeah, it's awful.
The next movie that we need to watch needs to be strong female lead movie.
We should find the movie that passes the Bechdel test. Do you know what that is?
No.
It's a test where you see if a movie has two female characters that have screen time for more than 5 minutes where they talk about something other than a man.
Ooh, we will.
And most movies don't pass it.
Well, I know that none of the movies we've watched so far have passed that test. So.
Yeah, most of these movies don't have women that talk to each other.
Okay, well, next movie, strong female lead.
We'll see.
I want something empowering.
So then we go, and the journalist is now talking to Susan, and she brings up the fact that Kane didn't bring up marriage to her until after he had lost the election. So he kind of, it was like he lost something, and to gain it back, he could gain it back through marriage. But throughout their entire marriage, he kind of guides everything to how exactly he wants it to be. He doesn't give her any input in anything at all.
Mm-hmm.
Then they go to her first singing lesson, and the voice teacher says like she can't sing, she's terrible. And she didn't sound that bad to me.
Yeah, I can't hit that note. So why are people so mean to her?
She just needed practice to reach those notes. I don't know, it confused me. Like, she wasn't bad.
Yeah. I don't know how she's impossible to teach. Like, obviously her range is pretty nice.
Yeah. And then like after Kane walks in and has her start again, she reaches those notes, which I don't know. I was like, why do people keep making fun of her?
Couldn't they have gotten someone who's more mediocre?
Yeah, couldn't they gotten a terrible singer? And Kane's just like, you just have to keep teaching her. And I agree. I don't think she's bad. But then it's another scene at the opera. It's the same performance, but it zoomed in on Kane this time, and he hears a woman laughing during her performance and saying how bad it is. I was like, wow, that's like clearly her husband's sitting right next to you.
But I think that people are saying that her singing's good, but her acting is awful. Which, yeah, you can see that her acting sucks.
But then they get reviews, and in the reviews it says that her singing was bad, and she's surrounded by all these newspapers on the floor, and she's just crying and screaming, and she says to Kane that she had never wanted to sing in the first place. Like, she's like, why did you make me do this? Because now they're all saying that I'm bad.
Yeah, she like just casually brought up the fact that she likes to sing.
But then even after she gets all these bad reviews and she's like, I never wanted to sing in the first place, he tells her that she has to keep going. And she goes on a tour of the country. And I did notice, like, it does another newspaper reel, and it seemed like only positive reviews from all the other newspapers. But
yeah, but all the other newspapers
they were all Inquirer newspapers. So after all these tours, or this tour of the country, we see Susan lying in bed, and there's a medicine bottle next to her, and Kane comes in, and then he gets a doctor, and he kind of just says, oh, I guess she drank too much of this bottle of sedatives that the doctor gave her to help because she's stressed about the tour.
Mm-hmm.
But she tried to kill herself because she couldn't bear to tell Kane that she didn't want to sing anymore, that this was never what she wanted to do. Like, why would you make me do this? I felt like I couldn't tell you that I didn't want to, so my only way out was this.
Well, she does tell him so many times, and I think that her words mean nothing to him. He just,
Yeah.
it's in one ear out the other. But I think this action really proved that she wasn't just complaining or whining. That's not what she wanted to do. She
Yeah.
liked him for who he was, not for what he could do for her.
And then finally Kane says that she won't have to fight to prove her worth to the world anymore, because why would anyone have to in the first place?
Yeah.
um and then it's shown that Kane built Xanadu for Susan, and she says to him, like, now you're shown this house and it's massive, and she says to him, like, I'm so lonely, this house is so big, we had people here last week and I don't even know if they're still here, this house is so big.
So when she was talking to him and kind of complaining about how lonely she is, he's like standing near the fireplace, and the fireplace is so big
It's
and so
massive.
like extreme that he looks like a tiny human, and it was really funny.
But while she's like, all she does is sit in front of this giant fireplace and does equally giant jigsaw puzzles.
Each jigsaw puzzle too kind of shows the passing of time and how boring it is. That's
Mm-hmm.
how I feel in quarantine right now. It's like day 62.
Yeah. And or she asks Kane to go to New York. Like, why don't we go back to New York where your newspapers are, like, why don't we go back? There's things to do there. And he says, "No, I don't want to go. We're going to stay." And that's that.
Hmm.
So Kane recognizes that she's so upset after many, many times of her telling him finally. And he throws a picnic and invites a bunch of people. And everyone is outside, but Kane and Susan are in a tent. And she accuses Kane of treating her like one of his statues, where he just throws money at her to get her to stay. And he says that he loves her, but she says to him, like, no, you don't love me, you only want me to love you, and that's why you do all these things. It's not to show you love me, it's so you can feel love from me. And then he just slaps her.
Yeah, yeah, that was. I don't know why. Every movie we've watched so far has violence towards women in it.
Yep.
Every one so far. I know we've only done three, but like it's teaching people that that's okay.
Mm-hmm. But also, before the picnic ends, where right after he slaps her, there's a woman screaming outside.
I think it was kind of symbolism
Yes.
almost for how she was feeling on the inside, because she was like completely done, but on the inside she's screaming like, I need to get out of this unhappy situation.
Yeah, and then she does. She packs her bags and says she's going to leave.
And the line that makes her leave is, well, basically he tells her lies, and she looks like she's about to stay, she's about to take the bait, and he goes, you can't do this to me.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning that this is all about him, this has always been about him all along.
Yeah.
She's like, see ya.
And then it cuts back to Susan in the present. She's much older now, and she's finally telling her story to the journalist, and that's where this is coming from. And she says to the journalist that he should talk to Raymond, who was the butler of Xanadu. The journalist travels to Xanadu, and Raymond says that he'll talk about Rosebud, but what's it worth to him? And he's like, maybe $1,000. And he says that Kane acted crazy sometimes. And then there's this transition back into the past, but what they're showing is Kane acting crazy. Like, this is right when she leaves him, and he closes her suitcase and then just throws it across the room, and then picks up another suitcase and tosses it, and then he just goes around and smashes apart the whole room, ripping things off the walls. He goes to break things on this small little table, but he stops and picks up a snow globe with a little tiny house inside of it, and he shakes it and the snow falls, and it's just like one of the very first scenes of the movie.
Mm-hmm. So this snow globe kind of resembles the boarding house that his mom owned,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that it kind of reminds him of his past.
Yeah.
That's why he keeps it this whole time.
So then we are cutting to present day, and they're packing up all of these statues and everything that's in there. Like, some of it's junk. He collected junk. He collected valuable statues, and he collected everything. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and the journalist is just kind of talking about Kane's life, and he's kind of come to the conclusion that maybe Rosebud didn't mean anything, but his whole that the journalist's whole time it's just been like a jigsaw puzzle, because he's trying to put these pieces of Kane's life together that don't necessarily make sense, that they maybe they do fit together, maybe they don't, but you have to figure it out in the right way. And the journalist also mentions that maybe Rosebud is something that he lost and could never get back. And that's kind of where I was thinking about most of the movie. Like Rosebud is that, like, that's why he kept buying these things, because he had lost something in his childhood. Like, he lost the love of his mother, he lost his innocence, because he was taken away to live with this banker when he was so young, and it was easier to collect things and have that try and fill a hole in his heart than to address it and figure out why he felt like he couldn't love people.
Mm-hmm. I think he kind of realizes that love is pretty much the only thing you can't buy. That's the only thing he doesn't have yet. And he spends his whole life trying to look for it and searching for it in different people, and he doesn't know how to love because his mom like gave him away um for money. And he also, because he thinks that money's the only way to like kind of get someone's approval or their loyalty, he doesn't have anything to give someone else
Mhm.
besides material items.
So as the film ends, they're kind of panning over all the stuff packed up in boxes, and the butler's saying, "Let's get rid of all this junk." And they pick up the sled, and then they go to this giant furnace, and you see it being tossed in, and it zooms into it, and it says Rosebud. And as it's kind of burning, that's like it's like burning the paint off of it and the varnish off of it first, but the only thing that's left when that happens is the word Rosebud. And then it ends, it's like a shot of outside of the house and this black smoke coming up from the chimney, and it zooms in on the no trespassing sign. And then that's the end of the movie.
Mm-hmm. What are your concluding thoughts on that?
I really liked it. I think it made me think a lot, and like we've said, I expected, like, once like that first scene happened, I expected there to be violence. I expected like there to be something sinister going on, and it's just this was his life. Like, this is why he is the way he is. It was kind of that question that they were looking to answer at the beginning with the journalist, like, not what he does, but why he does it. And I feel like it answered that, and I thought it was really good. Thoughts?
Oh, yes. I like movies that you could watch like you're reading a book. Like when you're reading a book, you look for symbolism and themes.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I kind of appreciate this movie, because there's a lot of that, and you kind of have to put two and two together to figure out like what some symbols mean. And I like how the sled was a symbol of his lost love and his lost innocence.
Yeah, and I appreciate the subtlety of everything.
Yeah. Are we glad that we've seen it now?
Yeah, no, I'm this is my favorite one so far. Definitely.
Same. But next we should watch a movie with strong female characters.
That is true. We definitely need that. I feel like that'll be hard to find in like classic movies, but I'm sure there's one out there. All right. Well, thanks for listening. That is the end of our discussion on Citizen Kane. Hopefully we have a strong female presence in the next one.
Yep.
But that's all for now.
Yes. So if you would like to follow us on social media, our Instagram is How Have We Never Podcast, and our Facebook is How Have We Never Seen This Before.
And make sure to send us suggestions on movies to watch, and also play along with our Guess the Movie of the Week to get a shout out at the beginning of the episode. All right, bye.
Bye.
Hey, congratulations, you've made it to the end of our podcast. We hope you enjoyed listening. How Have We Never Seen This Before is produced by Isabel and Lauren. The music is by Scott Holmes. The podcast art is by Michael Beaumont over at Monitor Comics, and our social media is run by Lauren Cola. Thanks for listening.